Welcome to Peacebuilding Initiatives with José Barzola. Peacebuilding initiatives are collaborative ways of developing healthy, positive relationships via dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, exploring ways to shift our own perspective to build compassion and empathy within our communities. Thank you for joining us today. On today's episode, we have Merleene Pohaikalani Kirkland, who also goes by Pohai or Tutupo, who has been a passionate practicing Buddhist of the Soka Gakkai International for over 50 years. This is an organization that supports the United Nations peace movement. She's a widow who is finding solitude and advancing her dreams forward in life by helping her family and her community build connection. Pohai is the mother of two hanai girls. One daughter is living on Hawaii Island, and the other is in the spirit world of her ancestors. She's a grandmother of one teenage young man attending West Hawai Educational Academy in Kona. She enjoys getting to know people who believe that dialogue will save the world. And that's exactly how I got to connect with Pohai over these past couple of years. Tutupo was born in Kapahulu on Oahu. Her grandparents were indigenous Hawaiians, also born on Oahu. Her grandfather has roots from Hawaii Island, and her grandmother has roots from Molokai. Tutupo attended Alawai Elementary, moved to Pearl City for middle school, and graduated from Waipahu High School in 1973. She still stays in contact with her marauders via Facebook. Tutupo obtained an associate's degree in liberal arts from Leeward Community College and has made continuous efforts in pursuing her bachelor's degree. Currently, Pohai has a role with Lualoa Elementary School Counseling Support Program by helping students, kane or boys, in third, fourth, and fifth grade. The program she leads is called Kupuna in the Garden, where she's helping to provide a space for the boys to be themselves and share time in gardening, uh, painting, and talk story. The boys have the option to choose. Tutupo, your story is so deeply moving. It sounds like a true embodiment of aloha, blending wisdom, compassion, and a commitment to fostering connection across generations. Your dedication to both your family and your community really shines through. And I can imagine how much the boys of Honolulu Elementary benefit from the program Kupuna in the Garden. The mix of gardening, creative expression, and open dialogue. Such a beautiful way to nurture not just their minds, but their hearts as well. And so I thank you so much for your grace and your time today. And I look forward to, I've had the wonderful pleasure of getting to know you over these past couple of years, but I, I look forward to having our audience get to know what a gem you are. So, um, thank you. And
Thank you.
thank you. As if before, we always have some questions, and we'll just kind of go from there and see where our journey goes today. Um, so you did just to backtrack a little, you mentioned Gakkai International, uh, and that you've been with them for over 50 years. So maybe you can share a little bit about like how did you first get involved and for other folks who might be interested.
Sure. First, thank you so much for this time and this space. Soka Gakkai International, my mother became a practitioner of Nichiren Buddhism in 1968. And we were living in Palisades in Pearl City at the time. And the SGI, when they promote Buddhism, it's life to life. It's never broadcasted or put on social media or whatever. I mean, I do use social media to introduce some of the philosophy, but the actual introduction is done one person at a time. So I joined in 1968 and grew in faith um, through the leadership of Daisaku Ikeda, who is, I consider him to be my mentor in faith. I don't believe he is my only, he is my mentor in faith, but he is not my only mentor. One of the things he would always encourage is to collect mentors. That's what we should be collecting, is people
I,
that can
I love
guide
that.
us. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
guiding us through life is so important, and especially in today's world. But um, so the practice is a living practice. So it's it is a practice, and for most people, very challenging because although you may have all the instruments of faith, the reality is it's difficult, to really challenge your life. But I've been practicing since I was 12, and uh, I've seen such great changes in my life. I've had great difficulties in my life, but that's what life is. And I believe that a philosophy that teaches you to endure, and I don't mean just, facade endurance. I mean the kind of endurance that fortifies your life so that you can go on one more day or two more days or however the case may be, because everyone is so different. And I really don't like to homogenize everything, because everything, everyone has such a special story to tell. And I think that's the beauty of life, is getting to know the individual, which is why I love the Kupuna in the Garden program, because you are able to, and and I know you know this because you're an educator and you're a dad, you're a parent. Um, you must be able to see the individual in front of you, because if we all know what it's like to be in front of someone that's not listening to you, that acts like they're listening to you, but they're not. They could care less. So I have had to learn to be the kind of, we always say, bring the Buddha to work, bring the Buddha to the meeting, bring the Buddha to the conference, bring the Buddha. Because as soon as you do that, whatever you would like to call it, I say Buddha, as soon as you do that, you're focused, you're listening, your eyes are on the individual, your heart is open, and you're just this open vessel for this person. And the amazing thing, and once again, I because you're a parent, I think you know exactly what I'm saying. The amazing thing is the other person, no matter what age, young or old, they can feel it. They can feel it. And right there, from once again, from a Buddhist perspective, that's the connection. Once you've got that, it's just never the same. It's just, you both grow. And I think, that's one thing with the counseling team that I'm working with, is because we always sit and, debrief, the week, the students. Um, One thing is so important, to be present, and if you're not present, you're not learning, you're not open, you're not growing, and we know this. And I like to think that that's an unforgettable connection, because the kids will never forget it. And even when you do this with adults, when you it's kind of a form. This is just my perspective, but it's kind of a form of ho'oponopono. It's kind of a form like that, where um, once you can see the person and the person can see you, um, that connection is unforgettable. It's very enlightening. It really is very enlightening. We have a saying, kokua aku, kokua mai, and it's the saying, you give, you receive. The more you give, the more you receive. And that's the beauty is, the counseling team will tell me, oh, kupuna, you're really helping to save lives. And I always say, but it's also my life that gets saved, because it's a two-way street. I have to grow so they can grow. Um, they'll grow so I can grow.
I love
So,
that.
and you can feel that. You can really feel that. And I know you know this. Because when you make that connection, it's unforgettable. With anybody, whether it's my neighbors. I live in a elderly housing apartments. Whether it's my neighbors, whether it's the taxi driver that takes me to my appointments, or whatever the case may be. I mean, uh, taking that moment, everybody is in your life for a reason. Yeah, for and I think that now there's that new saying they're either in for a reason or a season. They either come through the life or but it doesn't matter. You have that moment. Someone once told me that you only have a moment to make a difference, and when that moment is over, it's gone. you know and then you regret, right? Oh, I should have, could have, would I should have done. But so sometimes what I have to do is I have to tell myself, ooh, if this is how I feel, I should say something. I mean, not to be mean or ungrateful, but just to tell the person things that maybe no one else would ever think, but yet it's something they need to hear you know and it's so important, I think, to because those moments don't come back. We think like, oh well, maybe later, or well, maybe not. What It doesn't come back.
No, thank you. Yeah, and thank you for reminding us about the importance of being intentional, really. That's really what it kind of comes down to. Being intentional in what we do, being present. Especially we're unfortunately constantly juggling. We try to multitask, and that's the key word, try, but just being present with definitely with your loved ones, but definitely with just everyone you come across. It
Right.
creates such a large impact. As I reflect upon the workshops that I do or when I teach, one of my things is always around I'm here to facilitate some information, but I'm really here to also just learn from you all. And simultaneously just having the opportunity to have a small group. Let's take time to actually get to know each other beyond. And that's I love when I happen to be invited into a group that I in a way has known each other for a while, but when we're done, they get to walk away with like, oh, I've never known everybody in the group in this capacity. And so being able to have that transformational experience, I think, is so essential. So thank you for creating those spaces for
Right.
folks and
Thank
for our
you.
youth.
Yeah. We have to do that with everyone. One of the things I learned from Daisaku Ikeda is when you talk to people, you it's always the same. I had a we had a friend that was once his translator, and she came from San Jose, California, and we lived there for a little bit. And she shared her experience where she was a translator for a portion of Daisaku Ikeda's visit in Russia to Gorbachev during that time. And he stopped his limousine to talk to two Russian little boys fishing right off the pier. And he went up to engage. Yeah. And so she was his translator there as well. And they were talking about what were they catching and how old are they and that they're brothers and so forth. And then he gets into the limousine and he drives to the Kremlin and he walks up those stairs to greet Gorbachev. And the way he greeted Gorbachev was no different from the way he was talking to those two little boys. And she picked up right up on that. So she was sharing that experience of how, wow, did I just see there was no change? There was no tick. There was same. So
Yes.
I often thought, when I meet people, to remember that the person in front of me is the most important person, no matter what age, no matter
Yeah.
who.
Yes. This reminds me of when I used to work at the Mountain Alliance for Peace. I would meet people who actually, so it's named after the late Senator Spark Matsunaga,
Yes,
and people would approach me to share the story of like, hey, I actually got to meet the late senator one time. I actually had to have lunch with him in Washington, D.C., and I have to say I've heard this story from at least more than 50 people, but it felt as though each like the 50 people all got into one room and memorized the same story, like
amazing.
to the point. And so what that taught me was like there was consistency in his character and how he treated everybody. It didn't matter if you were a farmer, if he's like, you voted, or you're my part of my constituency. And he treated them with that same respect and care. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, so we can only aspire to, um, we can have 50 plus people after we've gone that can share the stories of
And it's
how they've
important
connected.
because people do not forget that moment.
Yes.
They don't forget that moment. I had a situation where one of the drivers of the taxi that takes me to my group that I meet a couple times a week, and he took a phone call while I was sitting in the back seat, and it was one of his sons, his second son, I think his junior, his son that's a junior, I think, in high school. Yeah, I think so. Um, and it was the counselor, and he actually left the phone on speaker, which I was kind of surprised because that's kind of a private call, right? Or take it later. But no, he kept it on speaker. And this man, this taxi driver, had limited English. And so, obviously I heard the conversation, didn't know the counselor, but, I knew the routine. And so, she was telling him that, if the son didn't improve, that, there would be a difficulty in graduating, right? So long story short, he was very, very, very upset. Not angry, just, very upset. And and then he started talking to me, and I'm in the back seat, but he was talking to me. He says, "Oh, my son, he was so worried, right?" So I said, I'm going to share some things, and you can either take it or not. It's thoroughly up to you, but these are a few suggestions. And so the end conversation was, if you'd like me to translate for you, I'll be more than happy to go to that meeting next Tuesday with you. Or another suggestion I have is, this is your second son, correct? And he said, yes. I said, what is the relationship with the older son? I think the older son was in 12th grade and this one in question was 11th. And he said, I said, what's the relationship like? And he said, oh, the relationship between that two boys is good. I said, then can I make a suggestion? And he said, sure, anything. I said, have the older boy tutor the younger boy. If they have a really good relationship, if they didn't, you'd have to intervene. You'd have to be a part of that team. But if they got it, let the older boy take that kuleana on and, connect. So I'm not sure how that went because I haven't seen the man since, but I did also offer to sit in the meeting if he wanted me to, and it really it blew his mind. Like, who's this lady? I just picked her up to take her to. But he knew that I cared, and he knew that I knew what I was talking about. So, but I did, if you need me to be present, I'd be more than happy to be present. Just to give you the opportunity to communicate with, the administration. So anyway, so it's moments like those, like I was saying, that's the time to make a difference.
Yeah.
Because when it's over,
Thank
it's
you.
over. It's too late to think what a coulda, shoulda, woulda. It's too late.
Thank you.
And he never forgot that, but I haven't seen him, since.
Um,
Oh yeah, because they changed too. They changed companies, I think. Yeah, but
well, I, I,
but
I,
just
I
taking
think
that moment.
life has a way of circling back around. So who knows when you'll run into him, or maybe you'll run to his son if it's been a couple of years
Exactly.
and you'll get to
Exactly.
reconnect. That's in my time on this planet, I have found, yeah, life has a funny way of circling back, and I'm like connecting the bridges where there weren't before. So
Exactly.
I wonder if you might share a little bit about, for folks who are listening, like what's your biggest source of strength in the work you are doing, especially given, the personal challenges you faced.
Mm. Um, I always depend on my faith. I pray a lot. I chant a lot. Start my day off in prayer, end my day in prayer. because a day is just one page, of life. Um, and one of the things, I've mastered in Buddhism is, to live with no regrets. That's very, very difficult to do, but it is worth the challenge to live with no regrets. Doesn't mean I don't have issues. Doesn't mean like I had my doctor asked me uh, recently. He said, do you get depressed? And I go, oh yeah, even the Bodhisattva and the Buddha, we're human. We get depressed, but we don't live there. We know not to live there, not to dwell there. But it's okay to go through that because we're human. Everyone suffers, but we got to just, I think the beauty of a diligent practice of whatever type, but let's say my Buddhism, the diligent practice is to persevere no matter what, no matter what. And life is harsh. We know that. We look at the world. I mean, we know that life is harsh, but to just not stay down, and that's hard to do. But I think if people have a really good faith and a really good practice, because that's what Buddhism is. It's practice. It's not just mere, religion and or philosophy. You have to practice it. And so how do you do that? You have many ways in which to practice and to get up one more time. And I think a faith or a practice that keeps you always front and center is very important. Very important. So a lot of times, no matter what happens in my life, sometimes small, sometimes huge, I always go back to that. I always go back to my faith and my practice because that's what it's for. Otherwise, why are you doing it? If it is not reaping, the benefits, if you're not growing and you are not happy, even through tumultuous ways, what's it for? I mean, I know that a lot of times people practice because the mom practiced, the dad practiced, the grandpa practiced, the great grandpa, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. But what about you? What's it doing for you? I mean, it's very vital that we walk the path. We always talk about this. One of my favorite books is The Parliament of Souls. And it's an older book, but I love it because it talks about, we're here to lead the people towards victory, period, in their lives. That's what we're here for. We're here to take everyone with us, not to leave anyone behind. And I had a friend tell me once, a counselor actually, she said, you're the kind of Buddhist that would just lead the people over the burning bridge. I go, well, then you really don't know me that well. And she goes, and she really is a very good friend. And I said, well, you really don't know me that well. I'm kind of surprised. And she said, why? I go, because I'm the type of Buddhist that would be in back of the crowd, pushing the people forward. That's part of being a practitioner is always the people first, in your life, no matter what. And it's hard because life is hard. So to give hope is vital because, and I know you know this, but some of the kids that I meet with, they're young, they're 5, they're 6, and they've got this baggage already. They're only 5 or 6, and they have such a tumultuous life already. Some of them are already in foster care. Some of them are in very, very unhealthy environments. So they come to school, and I always discuss this with the counseling team too, is they come to school, we bolster them, or we should be bolstering them, and then they got to go home. And then they come back tomorrow. and it starts again. You're constantly bolstering the spirit, you know. And if we cannot malama the spirit, there's really not much we can do. Because it's just so repetitive. These kids are coming back to us and then they're gone for the weekend. And then Monday comes back, bolster again. So it's you know, quite a humbling experience to be with kids that have no hope, you know, and you're just constantly encouraging them and listening to them. Little things like I have, the fifth grade boys, they're hungry all the time. There's not enough snacks for them. And they see me before lunch and they're hungry, right? So, but finding that connect, like one of them is an amazing baseball player. Amazing. He's got a wonderful future if he can focus. Then the other two is ukulele. One can sing, the other one doesn't sing, but plays a very mean ukulele. So thinking out of the box, saying things like, "Oh, I'll bring you ukulele. Come, play. You want to play for 30 minutes? Play for 30 minutes. And it's just, it lights them up, right? You're like, oh, wow, Kupuna wants to hear me play music. Something like that, just being able to give them, spark. The hard part is, for me anyway, is knowing that, you know, they really do need to be strong in their life, you know, and hopefully navigate through their life. And I always tell them that, that you are more than this. Yeah, more than this. Look at you. You've got so much potential. Because for a lot of them, I don't know what you experience, but for a lot of them, they do not have a grandma or a grandpa in their life or kupuna, in their life. So it's a concept. I never thought I'd say this, but it's a concept where they don't know, the tutu. Tutu is not here, or they live somewhere else, or um,
Yeah, it is. And thank you for that reminder of, we think about what's the norm or what's not the norm, and it is a privilege to still have your tutu with you. Um, I'll share for me. I mean, many of my grandparents passed away when I was a lot younger, and yeah, so I never truly. I don't think at those stages of my life I was, or I am now, where I would have the skill sets to have a deeper conversations and maybe know what questions to ask. And so all you can do is just try to figure it out. But yeah, no, it is an honor to be with tutus and kapunas across. And I think Hawaii does a beautiful job of just like with the larger community, not so
right,
uh, you know, nuclear mindset of what the mindset of a family is. So, and thank you for just being that for the youth, which are so needed. Just to going back to your talk about finding lots of mentors, it is so essential. I mean, I look at I went into higher ed because not because I went into college thinking I want to work on the college campus. It was more of like I met some really great mentors while I
right,
was an undergrad, and it inspired me to continue on because I wanted to be that for other folks, or because we sometimes don't know what questions to ask. And my philosophy has always been, when I was an advisor, I would give more information than what was being asked, because I just thought maybe some of this stuff might be helpful along the way. But
right.
going back to you and your journey and your background, you've your your family roots span across different islands: Oahu, Molokai, Hawaii Island. How has these different cultural influences shaped your identity and your approach to life today?
Um, Always. I mean, we're always, well, we should always be learning, and we should look for the effect. we should be effective. Like one of the things I learned from all these different groups, actually, because I also lived in Samoa. My husband was Afakasi. My husband was Samoan. And so I lived in America Samoa from 77 to 85, and boy, did I learn a lot there. But the the fact that you talk to an individual, whoever that may be, no matter what age, and you find what I learned to do is find myself in their story. What part of me is in their story? And as long as I can find myself, and I usually can, I think we all can, but you got to be looking and you got to be open. But if I can find myself in their story, that's my connect with that individual. It's, you know what? Yeah. Like I'll be talking to someone and I'll say, I'm thinking, that's true. That happened to me. Or, oh gosh, I remember my tutor saying that, or my father saying that, or, that connect. And once you find that connect, that's it. You know that you can have a great effect on each other, maybe. I don't think it's a one-way street with affecting lives. Should be both. Should come back to you as well. You give, you get. But I would have to say, out of all the different places I've lived, including Silicon Valley, Northern California, that's that's what I've learned is if I can find myself in your story, then it's a better connect, you know. And there's always, I think, there's always that in everybody. Everybody that I've ever met, that you can affect. One of the things my family used to always tell me, or even my friends actually, they'll say things like, "Oh, you should take a picture," or "You should capture that moment." But I'm of the belief that that moment is captured. It's captured here, and it's definitely captured in the Pohai, and that's where I'm going to keep them. You know, I don't need to. I mean, this is great. I'm not saying it's not, but for me, I make it a point to cherish that and keep it here. That effort is important to me.
No, I agree, especially in this day and age where we're constantly taking photos and recording of things.
Everybody's
I
always taking
I
pictures. They're not
I will
enjoying
say
the
that
moment.
some of my own fondest memories are the ones that are not recorded. They're just such unique experiences that
Absolutely.
happy to share story and share those with folks and tell them what it was like. But and it's actually, and I think that speaks to once more going back to being present,
Right.
intentional in the moment, because there is this mechanicalness about like, let me get the camera out to capture
Mhm.
this for later. Um, but yeah, no, I completely agree, and I do think, the more I truly do believe that we can talk to anyone on this planet, and the more we talk, we will find some commonalities. Even if you think it's like the most extreme, you're like, how can I even connect with this person? Whether it's political views or religion, people always say don't talk religion and politics, but I think at the essence, there's things like a care for your community, a care for our youth, or for the future of
Mhm.
the land that takes care of us. And so, yeah, there's lots of different ways we can try to find
Right.
those
And that's
bridges.
why being present is so important because so much is happening all the time. Sounds and feelings and just everything's happening. The
Yeah.
lava 25th episode, all kinds of stuff is happening. But just trying to keep, the feeling, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but the feeling of someone listening to you is a great feeling. The feeling
Yeah.
that that person that you're talking to only is present to you at that moment. that is an amazing feeling,
Yeah.
especially for people who are not used to it or never expect it, you
I
know?
think that is the one thing I've definitely learned over these past few years. There are folks who unfortunately have never had the opportunity to have active listening practice with them, and it's disheartening. And I hope that we can change that,
I
one person at a
remember
time.
I asked the question of Daisaku Ikeda one question. Well, I was very fortunate. Like most youth in the 60s, we were around him a lot because he visited Hawaii. You know, outside of Japan, he promoted Nichiren Buddhism to Hawaii first, and so we got to spend a lot of time with him. And my question was, um, oh, how do you, how can you speak to all these array of people, different people? You know, how do you do that? And all of his answers, I mean, he had deep answers, of course, but all of his answers were very simplistic most of the time. And he said that you speak to their heart. If you speak to the person's heart, that's all that matters. And he said, you know, even if it's a room full of people or you know, United Nations even, um, from your heart. That's all. If you're speaking from your heart, they get that message. And I believe that. I do. I do believe that because I've spoken to many groups and I've often found that to be very true. Very true. Like no matter what's going on in my head or what might be taking place around me, I always come back to, you know, really what's in the heart. That's important. That's who you're talking to. That's what you're talking to. And sometimes what I used to do, I do it now too, I guess, but I'll actually put my hand on my heart so I can feel that beat to remind me, keep it, you know, keep it there. Always keep it there. Keep it truthful and just always keep it there. And
I
that
think
helps.
uh, it got me thinking about what you just said about how not only speaking from the heart, but also some folks need to figure out what's truly there because sometimes we don't give it enough time. And we live in a society that, it's one of those things that kind of piques my ears when I hear, someone apologizing for like crying or being emotional. And
Oh,
I'm just like, no, I'm like, that's a superpower. Please
yeah,
never
I
apologize
agree.
for that. No, use your voice by all means.
I agree. I totally agree because I mean, you know, I know that sometimes when people get emotional, um, I shouldn't say I know, I feel, I know, but um, it depends on what they're conveying because sometimes when people get emotional, it can just kind of really, the audience's attention can just wrap, you know, just wrap around. Um, so, you know, but that's them. I mean, however they want to express that's fine. But I just have found that sometimes the crying, you're not able to decipher what they're saying because they're crying, or the feeling of the room just kind of like, you know, just kind of like wraps around and changes. But it is what it is. It's their moment. It's not mine. So they have to, you know, own it. But I find that if we are, like usually when I'm in a group and we're talking story or we're, you know, we're trying to solve some, you know, problem or whatever the case may be, I usually, or if we're giving presentations, I'm usually the person that will be the last. I will ask, can I be the last person to present? Because I like to hear it all so that whatever it is I share isn't redundant, doesn't need repeating. Um, and I like for what I say, and I'm sure everyone is like this, but to be unique in that it's not the same message, you know. So a lot of times I'll do that. And sometimes I'll just dump the whole presentation and just give a real quick synopsis because everything's already been said. So it doesn't have to be repeated. We've already heard it once. I had a situation where I was on a panel for Teach for America. This was years ago. And there was a lot of us. In fact, I remember telling the coordinator, I don't need to sit up here. You got enough people. There's 10 of us. Yeah, that's a lot. Anyway, so there was a young teacher teaching out at Kea'au, I think. And she had a student that, he wasn't going to go to college. You don't want to go to college? He's not going to go to college. And he didn't feel bad about it. That was his decision. And so he was telling her, no, you know what, miss, I'm just gonna go fish. That's what I want to do. I'm just gonna go fish. So anyway, long story short, everybody, I waited to be the last. Everybody gave their, and I was sitting next to one of the best teachers and or administrator and superintendent Art Souza. He was sitting to my right, and I had known him for many years, but anyway, so everybody gave their, and so when it came to me, I didn't have to be redundant. So, but what I did ask her, I asked her about him, about the student. And then I remember telling her, can you take him a message from me? And she looked at me, she goes, sure, Auntie, I'd love to do that. I said, tell him to be the best fisherman that he could ever be. I said, because being a fisherman feeds the community, more than likely feeds his family. And that is an honorable thing. If he doesn't want to go to college, he doesn't want to go to college, but just be the best, you know, fisherman. And I just remember, her look was like, oh, finally something I can use, that kind of enthusiasm where, it's not about judging him, right? I mean, we can all do that, but it's about letting him know that what you're doing is worthy stuff. That's a community contributor. Isn't that one of the, I forget the standards it was, whatever. And I said, that's a community contributor. That's beautiful. And I just remember saying, you need to take that back to him. Tell him that this is what Auntie Pohai from like, well, no, it was at Kalaka'i, but yeah. So I was, and just keep it simple.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I said. That's what I was thinking. After everybody else's, insistence that he pursue higher education. I'm not saying he shouldn't. I'm just saying that can't we just validate what he's saying now? Because who knows what'll happen? I mean, he could very well go to trade school or something, but not that judgment, right?
I wonder if just to shift a little to you shared a little bit about well in the bio I shared about how you attended Waipahu High School in the
Mm.
70s. I wonder if you might, what was it like attending in the 70s and how do you keep those connections alive with your classmates?
Yeah, you know what? We're celebrating. They're going to be in Vegas soon. I think next month. It's like 50 something years
That's
already.
amazing.
Um, yeah, what happened was, I mean, there was a time of disconnect, but then there was, wherever I traveled, pretty much wherever I traveled, I met, classmates, wherever I traveled. Um, and they were always like, oh, yeah, we're going to be in Vegas or we're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And then I came back to Hawaii Island in 95, or I came to Hawaii Island in 95. And yeah, so we've kept in touch. Waipahu in the 70s was a very, yes, we did have a mix of races, um, but it was a real calming vibe, back then. It was, and it still is actually. Waipahu's got some, accolades, let me tell you. Not just sports, but academically as well. But um, it was a real calming time. And it's amazing that here it is 50 something years later that we belong to the Marauders Facebook group. And so, we've lost a lot of people. Obviously, we've lost a lot of people. Um, and some of them, and we have a couple 73 grads here on Hawaii Island. But some of them, you barely remember, because they were quiet then. They weren't the outstanding sports or whatever, valedictorian or, that they didn't stand up front. I hate to say they didn't stand out because everybody's got their own standout, but um, wonderful teachers. We had Mrs. Akana, which she was a wonderful Kupuna. But the teachers were marvelous, and the school spirit was marvelous. I don't know too many people today that that have children or grandchildren even at that school, but some of our alumni have continued. I don't think they're teaching there anymore, but have continued like community service type programs or community programs within the school, which is awesome, you know. And of course, everything seems so different and smaller, when you're older, just like you don't even remember, yeah, the class sizes. And the class sizes were, I mean, in the 70s, they were doable. Today's classrooms are like craziness, public classrooms. Um, but it's so nice to keep in touch with them because, and the losses, the people that you lose, and then the memory, you remember. I mean, do you keep in touch with your class at all?
I will say that I'm going like you talk about like social media, I think has done a wonderful job, especially like Facebook, there's all these like Facebook groups about the class of so and so.
Right.
We don't have a Facebook group, but we did reconnect through personal
Good.
profiles. And so I think in that method, when there are gatherings, they'll send out a message, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, but yeah, no, I mean, especially this day and age where it's like people move, not everyone's in the same
Right.
hometown.
Right.
So through the grapevine, I hear about it. One thing that so there's like so much information on social media, it can get very overwhelming and it can be very time consuming as well. Um, one little thing that I've been doing for I don't know how many years now, definitely over 15 years. I think Facebook's been around for
20
21,
something.
21 years. Yeah, 2004 it came out. Um, I go on every day just to go, not to scroll, just to go to the birthday section. And I just wish everyone a happy birthday. And at this stage, many times it's already pre-written in there because that's smart technology. And all you need to do is just push send.
Right.
Um, and it doesn't take that much time, whether I do it through my phone, whether I do it on the computer. And it's funny that I mean, either, you just get like an emoji, you get an actual thank you, but I find it amusing when people respond with like, "Oh, I was waiting for your 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 happy birthday wish." It's like it's almost become tradition now, and so building these new traditions, and so in a way, utilizing technology or the social media platform as a tool to continue to nurture or stay slightly present, I guess,
Right.
in someone's life. And
Well,
yeah,
some of my school friendships, we do email, you know. But one of the reasons I don't use I use social media to communicate or to take in information because there's some independent news people that I particularly like to get information from. But I will on occasion connect with people to encourage them or to encourage their life, because I've used it to, and then we'll go into Messenger. We might start off in Facebook or Instagram, but we end up going into Messenger and keeping it that way. So that's a little more fluid conversation. And then, I'll use, if I can call, I'll call, but if not, I'll use that recording, yeah, that clip, yeah, where you can communicate. They can hear your voice. Because we have a saying in, we have a lot of sayings in Buddhism, but we have a saying that says, the voice does the Buddha's work. So the voice is very valuable. A lot of times when people hear your voice, it's very calming, and they get a sense of your heart and what you're trying to convey. And it's important. So there's been a lot of people that I've been able to just encourage, just encourage because they're having a bad day or it's a rough time, you know. So I do use that as a way to reach out too. I don't like to get caught up. Like I always say, you need to know how to use social media, not social media use you. And it's important that, because I'll tell you, even complete strangers, if they're having a bad day and I come across, I'll I'll ask them if they're okay. And what kind of help do you need? Or do you have someone you can reach out to? I won't just scroll by because, you just never know when you're saving a life. And to me, it's all about saving lives. Everything that I do is about saving lives. And little things like my neighbors, because they're older than I am. And, so I'll check on them, and or I'll hear them coughing, or I hear, these kinds of things, this kind of compassionate act is something that could save a life. This reaching out can possibly prevent a lot of, uh, frailty. So yeah, so I don't, I don't monopolize. I do like to. I'm a real podcast freak. I love listening to podcasts, and some of these podcasts are phenomenal because you feel like, and maybe that's the intention of podcasts, but you feel like you're there, like you're there, right there, part of that conversation, And I love the vulnerability of some of these podcasts too. So yeah, I don't necessarily love social media, but I do use it.
Yeah,
I do use
I think
it.
as we're talking about like intentionality and being present, I think that's the beauty of podcasts. It is like you get to be
Right.
that fly in the wall,
Hmm.
and go on this journey with and get to experience this relationship that this group or
Well, it's also a
this couple
great
has.
learning experience. I mean, you can learn so much by listening to these people that are so openly sharing, you know? Um, so yeah, there's a lot of people out there, but I mean, enough. I can't deal with it like all day long or anything. But and there's certain things that I'll watch pretty consistently. But if there was anything on social media other than keeping in touch with family and friends, it would be podcasts. That's my favorite thing to do. Sometimes I'll just leave it on and I'll do whatever I'm doing, in the house or cooking or whatever the case may be. But it's just so nice to hear the wisdom out there. I mean, people that share their vulnerabilities. Like I love listening to Gabor Mate. I love him. Um, or even that CEO guy that has a podcast. Or Huberman. There's certain people, and it all depends on my mood too, because sometimes it's a little heavier for the moment, and I might not be ready for that. Um, but for the most part, what I like the best about podcasts or interviews in general is you get to know that person, you get to know that person a little bit. And that's a lot for people to share some of their, you know, vulnerable uh, about their life. It's just, it's it's amazing. But yeah, I love those. And I'm a fool for those, those posts on sanctuaries where people have animal sanctuaries, where they save the
Yes.
animals. Oh my gosh, I'll watch that forever because I just love the animals. They save the goats, they save the donkeys. I mean, just like, oh my goodness, the cows or whatever the case may be. But I mean, they save these animals.
Yeah.
And I just love that so much. And I'm just so grateful there are people out there that do that.
And I think one of the things that podcasts also do is, it gives us an insight into like everyday stories. Something that, if we look at our news, it tends to be, I mean, I get it. They have 20, 30, maybe an hour, 40 minutes max to try to put together the news of the day. And so they're going to focus on a few things. It's not going to cover everything in the world. It's just kind of what came to the limelight. And many times they tend to be just very upsetting stuff, really not
Not the good
stories,
stuff.
not
Yeah.
stories of resilience, stories of, somebody helping someone out, that kind of stuff. And so that's where, and there's so much like noise, so much media out there nowadays. So trying to find something that you can truly connect with, it's just building other forms of community. That's what I'm getting at. Uh and you're kind of breaking the fourth wall here because this is going to be a recording that will be on Spotify, podcast, and so forth.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
definitely, we're just contributing to the good work that's being done. So thank you. Um,
True.
have a so going back to someone who believes deeply in dialogue as a force for change. Wonder if you might have any kind of tips or guidance. How do you engage in conversations that can bridge divides, especially with people who may not share your beliefs or values?
Um, One of my favorite skills is listening. You have to really be a listener to some of these conversations before you can engage and respond. And sometimes people will be willing to share and sometimes not. Sometimes you have to, start the conversation, but it all depends. I mean, a lot of the groups that I work with, even on Zoom, are self-starting groups. I mean, they're engaged for a reason. They're there for a reason. There's a theme, you know. Um, but I think the greatest thing that I can offer is sometimes silence. Just to listen more before I formulate if at all, a response, or something that I can put into the pot, like the umeke concept, right? The bowl of light concept. What can I put in there? That is a value, to this conversation. Um, which is vital. But yeah, I think just being silent because we can always talk, we can always have the conversation, but sometimes the listening helps because you can really sometimes, not all the time, but most of the time you can kind of figure out where the person is coming from, what place is that person coming from, you know? And then engage, accordingly, but not to engage just to say stuff. I think um, conversations are richer if you can connect, not disconnect. It's so much richer that way. Um, but you're not going to know if you, this is just my perspective, but I always say this is my perspective based on Buddhism. Everyone's always used to me saying that, but but you won't engage if you don't let the other person express and, and share and be verbal and be vocal. um because a person's input says so much. If we really think about it, it says so much about the person. And I'll tell you what, most people, they're hurting. There's something in them that just hurts, and they just want to speak. The groups that I work with, a lot of the groups that I work with are groups that are seeking healing. So I don't always engage with most of the common theme in the groups that I'm with have to do with healing. So you have to let the person speak first. Even the children, like I notice people. My daughter will do this sometime with my mo'opuna, and he's 13, but she'll just kind of like override his conversation. I have to tell her, you know what? Instead of telling her, actually, I usually just ask him, what is it you're trying to say? Or is that what you meant? Or, just directing the conversation back to him because he's the person we're asking, right? But, nobody likes for someone else to override, their thought, right? Because what happens then, we all know what happens. They shut down. Because you don't want to listen to me anyway. You asked me, but you're not, not listening. But so I think one of the greatest skills that I can have is listening, letting the person, speak, and then taking that lead, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's okay just to be silent. It irks a lot of people to be silent, but in that silence is also the time to heal too. So that's important to acknowledge that silence. And it's really hard for most adults. Teachers do it pretty well though, or educators do it pretty well, but especially with children, to just allow that to be quiet. You know, I mean, yeah. So that happens. I see that, a lot. And so with my grandson, for example, or any child, but with my grandson, for example, I always leave that space. We have a lot of great conversations because he knows that with Tutu, you know, you can tell me anything. You can tell me anything, you know. And I want him to know that he can tell me anything. I will always be here, for him, for that. And it's the same with my students. And frankly, it's the same with adults. A lot of times adults need to be heard, you know. Um, and that's one of the things I learned something from Susan Sarandon is one of my favorite actresses, and she's one of my favorite activists, actually. She said something in a movie once, Shall We Dance with Richard Gere, and I'll never forget this. And whenever I see the movie, I watch it just for this part where she thinks that her husband is, having an affair, hires a detective. The detective finds out this information, ends up being J-Lo as a dance instructor. Anyway, and so they meet at this bar, and the detective gives her all these, pictures and waits to engage in conversation with her. And she pays him, leaves the pictures, pays him, and stands up to leave. And he's like, "Wow, don't you want to know this and that?" And she said, "No, because I realized something." She said, "All anyone ever wants in life is to be validated. That's all." And she said, and I overstepped my boundary here with my husband because I haven't even given him the opportunity to tell me what's going on, right? And that was like such an adult conversation to have. That's a big deal. And I'll never forget that. But that's what you said. You said that's all anybody wants is to be validated, to be seen, right? To be heard.
Yeah.
That's it. And I
I
think I try to take that into any conversation because or any group because it's true. When you really see the dynamics of the people in that group, oh, you know. Yeah, you know.
thank you for
Yeah.
reminding us also the importance of just being not only being in the moment, but we're talking about dialogue, and most people think about words, and being exchanged and active listening, but there's also great power in just sitting in the moment in silence and sharing in each other's energy, aura, whatever you want to call it. Like, um, it was, I think, I always share how in a over probably 15 years ago, or no, more than that now, I I worked at a place where I would make phone calls to get folks to take these health surveys, and all I had was the power of the tone of my voice. And little did I know what great lesson I was in for in those like 8, 10 months that I was there, having to navigate this new form of communication where I wasn't able to use nonverbal communication or my hands or my facial expressions or my eye. Like it's just my voice and understanding the tone of your voice and how powerful that can be, but also just knowing when to take a pause and how powerful that can be as you're sitting with folks or
Very, very powerful. Yeah, because in that moment, you're processing what just happened or what was just
yeah,
said. Sometimes it doesn't need a response. Um, it just needs space,
yeah,
you know.
most
And that
definitely.
space was the chosen time to
Yeah.
share it. Like that. Yeah, I
I,
don't think it always has to be about the dialogue, although I think when we did that theme, the theme was Can Dialogue Change the World? And I think one of the speakers said it's the only thing that can. Um, because with dialogue, I mean, there's a difference between, being overactive dialogue. I mean, just sometimes people don't really listen long enough to really catch what the individual is trying to express, or they cut them off. Um, but this person said dialogue is the only thing that can save the world. And basically, he was saying that in order to have really effective dialogue, one person has to be a listener. One person has to listen to that. And maybe not thoroughly 100% understand it, but at least you're validating this person's feeling. This is how this person is responding. And I know I use the word validation a lot, but that's an important word. People love to feel like, oh, I've been heard, I've been listened to, I've been heard, you hear me, you know. They're not necessarily looking for someone to understand. They just want to speak. They want to share, how they feel about something. Um, and giving them that space is so important because they may not have that opportunity anywhere else. I mean, that's how I feel about kids anyway. I can't speak for adults, um, but I'm assuming, adults feel the same way. But yeah, dialogue can definitely be so effective. But we see it from a Buddhist perspective, we see dialogue as a way to express yourself, period. And expressing yourself is very important. If you shut it off, that person just, it just keeps piling up and piling up. It's almost like Gabor Mate says, it's almost like trauma, right? You just, keep holding it in. Um, so yeah, I do believe that dialogue is the only way that we can get to know each other. But we've got to allow that time and that space, which is why I loved your Zoom, your meetings, because it's a way, even if I don't participate, it's a way to hear all these array of responses. And I love being with the young people because they've got a great energy and a vibe, that I love. I mean, Kupuna is a little different because Kupuna is usually the retrospect of whatever it is, we're talking about because they've lived it. We have a group in the Soka Gakkai. We call them the many treasures group, and they're usually 65 and older because they've lived. So they're Daisaku Ikeda named them the many treasures group. But yeah, just I love like attending your groups, but and even some of the other groups that I support when I can, just to listen to all it tells you so much about their life, what they're going through, without even saying that. It's just their response, to the conversation. I have one group. I don't know if you know uh, Hank Wesselman or Halimakua. Halimakua, you might know, but it was a group actually spawned from the book The Bowl of Life, and I think there's a Bowl of Light, and then there's another one, Remembrance, or there's a second book, and so this group has been carrying on since Hank and Halimakua passed a few years back. Um, but when we meet, we have these themes, and then we journey into that theme. The journeying mean basically, you put yourself into a kind of a real deep space, where you can you listen to the drumming, the shaman drumming, and you just kind of like go with it. And it was on libraries. That was the theme, something to do with a Greek library. And then you share your journey after, you give your reflection. You write it down as best you can, then you share it. And my journey into this library of aeons ago, um, there were no books in my journey. There was no books. Um, there were just people, rows and rows of people. All these other participants, they had scrolls, they had books. Pohai's journey was rows and rows of people because people are the library. That's their wisdom is the library. So I understand that somewhere, I don't know if it was the Netherlands, where they actually have that kind of conversation in the libraries, where they bring the person who knows the topic together with somebody that needs to find out the topic, and they bring them together. And they sit, like a library, right? And so I thought it was the neat. I have many journeys, but that one what stood out for me because I remember thinking when I came out of that was like, wow, that's true because it's people. Yeah. That's why I didn't see any books. I didn't see anything. All I saw was these rows and rows of people in this very old Greek-like palace-like library. Kind of wild, you know. But those are those groups are amazing. Really.
Thank
Cracks me
you.
up.
Thank you. Um, just to shift a little to Kupuna in the Garden.
Mhm.
So your work with Holualoa Elementary Kupuna in the Garden program seems It sounds very impactful. Might you tell us a little more about what you hope the boys in the program to take away from their time with you, as well as how do you think, the activities support their emotional and personal growth?
Um, the main thing that I hope that they get from spending time with me in the garden, and I chose the garden because I really didn't want to be in a classroom because they're in a classroom all day. And it's open air, and it's they're able to do the choices, konane, art, puzzles, planting, whatever. Um, but my main hope that they know that they're worthy, and they're what they say and think matters. That's basically all I want, is for them to feel that and know that and take it with them. Some of them will come back to me, next school year. Some of them, the fifth graders, obviously they move on, but and some of them, all I can do is pray. I always say that too. All I can do is pray because um, one, you hope that you've affected their life. I think I have, but you hope that you affected their life to where they know they always have somebody that they can turn to. You know, that's important to me because my idea is to be that anchor for them, so that especially during the school year, obviously when they see me. But I worry about the ones that are going to move on that may not have that, and they're going on to middle school, and it's a whole new world in middle school. And if they're lucky, they get a counselor that isn't overwhelmed, because most of them are. Um, which is why they welcomed this additional program at this elementary school. Frankly, I didn't think they would, because I really, because everybody's so busy, and then you have, this creature that's saying that, he's going to dismantle DOE. So there's a lot going on. So I thought, no, they're not going to go for this. I wrote everything up under the SEL, guidelines and so forth. But I thought, oh, they're not going to go for this. And I'll be darned, they did. They're like, no, this is exactly what we need. We need more of this. But there's no time.
Congratulations on getting it through.
They have no time, right? Yeah, I was surprised because we didn't start right away. We didn't start right at the beginning of the year. This time we will, I'm sure, in September or maybe August. Um, but yeah, I didn't think they'd go for it because I was like, where are they going to find the time? And then when they approved it, and they asked me where I wanted to work out of, they were really stunned when I said the garden. But they have a beautiful location, right? And so now that I've been in the garden, and I've had some community people contribute to the garden. I have a couple native plants that I'm growing, and there's all this stuff. The community is engaged, right? So, and that's the Holualoa community. Um, so, but my main concern would be that the especially the ones that are going fifth to sixth grade, that if they ever need me to talk story with, then I'm always there for them. Yeah, always. Because who doesn't want or need even somebody to talk to or listen, basically. I mean, I do more listening than anything, because I mean, third graders are unloading, third graders. And you're thinking, like, third grade, man, they should be just digging life. They shouldn't have all this baggage on them. But they do. The adults in their life are so overwhelming, you know. And if they're lucky, like I have one young lady, one fourth grader, I think. Yeah, fourth grader. She's with her grandma, so she's like loving it, because grandma, she's got grandma's undivided attention, you know.
So it's not just the students coming, the students come with their grandma as well. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, no,
Oh,
but as she shared with me,
oh, okay, okay.
she has her grandma, I mean, some of these kids have nobody,
Oh,
and the
okay.
ones that go from house to house or foster care to foster care, and then there's the ones, yeah, that go back to the mom and dad, which is a very volatile environment. And these are the things, that's why whenever I enter a new project, whether it be, it doesn't matter what it is, whenever I enter a new project, I really chant and pray a lot because it's not just about me, it's about the environment, and I've got to protect the environment. Um, and then you want to be effective without being overwhelming, you know, because these kids, well, adults too, but these kids, they have enough overwhelming in their life.
Yes.
So just to be present, just to be present. And it's nice because they'll say things like, oh, Kupuna, I really like coming here because, you let me talk or you let me, just be. And they need that kind of space because school is, I mean, it shouldn't be this way. I mean, I know schools that aren't this way, but schools are just, it's just pounding all the time, just go, 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 go for a lot of them. And you can see it. And then, the kids, I remember years ago when I started at Waikoloa Elementary School, I met a kindergartner. What is kindergarten's 5 years old, 6. And I met a, such a cutie. And today we keep in touch via the Facebook. He's amazing. But he was 5. And I remember I was walking up through the pathway by kindergarten and I came in through the side door to the office. And here was this kid sitting on the chairs in the front office. He was a little restless. And I remember saying, hey, brother, why are you not outside, at recess? And he goes, well, I got in trouble. And I'm like, oh, what's your name? So he told me his name. And I said, what you do? And right then and there, the office secretary says, Kumu, um, we're asking not to engage with him. I said, what? And she goes, we would rather he just sit there because he's in trouble. He was swearing, I'm swearing, out in the playground, the kindergarten playground field. And I remember I looked at him, I go, brother, how old are you? And he goes, 5. I go, swearing? He goes, yeah, He, and then they suspended him. And I told him, I go, whoa, brother, you were the first kindergartner I have ever met that got suspended. Anyway, long story short, I got to know him very, very well. And in 3rd grade, he told me something I shall never forget. He said, you know what, Kumu? He said, in my house, I'm the parent. 3rd grade. What is that? 8, 9? He
Yeah.
goes, he
Wow.
goes, he goes, he goes, Kumu, in my house, I'm the parent. Whoa, blew my mind. And I told him, I looked at him. I mean, I wanted to cry, but I looked at him and I said, then, brother, be the best parent you can be. Oh my gosh, but to have that kind of awakening, yeah. And then the same young man in grade 5, the counselor and I went to, walk with him. We went to his home, did a lot of home visits back then. And so what is that? 90 to 2000, but 95 to 2000. Um, but anyway, we went to pick him up. We're going to go walk. And he decides he wants to take the dog. He takes this tiny little Frenchie, really cutie dog. And the mother comes running out with water, okay, with water, the bottled water. And poor thing, he thought she was bringing the water for him. She was bringing the water out for the dog. She ran out, grabbed the water, poured it for the dog, you know. And we're standing there like, oh, yeah. Like these experiences teach you so much, so much about life and about people. And you ask yourself, how much can they endure, especially as children? How much can they endure? And I think that's why this Kupuna program is so vital. I mean, I'm really lucky. I have a wonderful counseling team. They're always going, Kupuna, we're so glad to have you. And I love it. It's beautiful. But yeah, they endure so much. And, so if I can just give them a little bit of my time, it's so wonderful to go back every week and have them get so excited, or the kindergartners, right? They got to kind of cross the street. Holualoa is on Duarte property. So they have a roadway, between two sections of the school. So, they got to be careful coming up the road, going down the road. But so the kindergartners have to cross that, right? It's not a big road. It's more like a lane, but nonetheless, heavy equipment goes up that road. Um, but yeah, you see the kindergartners, they come over and first graders, and it's just it's just such a nice way for me to share love, to share aloha, and
That's
it's an important thing, and it works both ways, right? I mean, I get that too. So I'm grateful. And I love that the counseling team and the teachers are grateful, to have, especially Kupuna, because there is no Kupuna on campus.
yeah.
A lot of your schools no longer have Kupuna program. They no longer have Hawaiian studies.
Mm,
So the concept is based on the aloha, the
yeah.
the giving, yeah, to the kids. So I'm grateful. I'm really grateful. I wasn't thinking, like where I live across the street from Hongwanji, and they have a preschool. So I go there once a week as well. And I'm just there for a short time. And I've never done preschool, I've always been either K-5 or K-12 or K-9 or whatever. Um, so I go across. The reason I did this, I'm going to tell you what happened, was when I first moved in here 3 years ago, I kept hearing them on the playground. And it was almost like they were saying, Kupuna, come. I just kept hearing them. And I went, okay, that's it. I'm going to go across the street. So I go across the street and I ask, and of course they're like, yeah, we need Hawaiian studies. So
Oh,
I go over there and they're tiny. I'm not used to preschool. They're like like little dogs. You gotta like place them, and then they look at you and you melt because they've got these big eyes looking up at you while you're doing a mo'olelo or something, and you're just like losing it. But it's so good for the heart.
yeah.
I always tell a lot of my kupuna, they think I'm nuts, but I tell them, no, hey, go over there, go do, you want to come up to Holualoa or whatever, but get out there because, it's so good for the heart, you know, it keeps you grounded, it gives you a reason for
Definitely.
being, you
Thank you
know.
for just you, you not only have had such a rich and meaningful life, but you continue to make it meaningful in every person that you interact with. And it sounds like you're still advancing your dreams. And I wonder, what other goals are you working toward right now, or what legacy do you hope to leave behind for your family and community?
Well, I've been working on, if you could see my bookshelf, I have tons of journals, yeah, journals from, that I wish to leave for my mo'opuna. So I'm writing a lot. I'm collecting pictures a lot. That's actually what I do on a daily basis. I mean, I have other things that I do, like today's wash day, so that's what I'm going to do. But, um, I do a lot of journaling for this young man, for my mo'opuna. Um, and so as I journal, I mean, it brings out a lot of richness, you know. It's not that I didn't have, you know, bad moments, and I share those too. I mean, you know, like Auntie Punani Burgess used to say, you can't just share the good stuff. You got to share the bad stuff too, because that's truly the awe, you know, the wailing, the cry. And so that's true. So I do. I write it all out. Um, and yeah, just every year, you know, every year I'm like, am I going to get another journal? Because, you know, I'm still working on the 5, 6, 7, but am I going to get another, you know, but now they have, I don't know if you've seen that Memento where it's like a live, you do a live. So what you're leaving behind is this live video,
Oh, yes.
a live video clip.
Okay.
And a
Yeah.
lot of people have done that with, you know, grave sites where they put it on and you just click and it'll play. Yeah. Um, but anyway, it's Memento. So I was thinking maybe eventually I could do that, but I'm trying not to be redundant too. So what I write in this journal, I try not to replicate. I mean, there's some that's kind of replicated because of the basic framework, yeah. But I just try to. So what you're doing is, or what I'm doing is reliving my life, right? Because I'm now writing down all these moments, and some of them you don't even like think about, right? Until the moment, and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's right. You know, because you can't possibly, you know, something has to spur that thought, or you know, and then you're like, oh, that's right, you know. I forgot all about that. You know, like my daughter's constantly telling me. Well, actually, my daughter is my hanai. My daughter is uh, Calais is actually, I have 4 younger brothers, so she's the second brother's daughter. We've raised her since she was 2, but you know, she was always telling me, "How come I don't know this?" I go, "Because you know, it doesn't spark, right? It has to spark first, and then you know, oh yeah, that's right, blah 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 blah, you know, whatever it is." So I'm enjoying that part too a lot, to tell you the truth. But yeah, so and then I got to sit. I was interviewed Corey Takeki and Mana Purdy from Queen Liliuokalani Children's Center. They interviewed me, and so what I did was this was about a year ago, and so what I did was I had my daughter and my grandson come with me because I was very involved with Queen Liliuokalani Children's Center with the communities that I was involved in. And then my daughter benefited from their program, and then now my grandson. So I mentioned to Mana when he said, "Oh yeah, Auntie, we want to do an interview." I said, "You should lay out for my daughter and my grandson so that you can see the generations that you know the Lilio program has affected." You know, um, but you know, that's what you might already know this, but that's what Auntie Lynette was. She was a social worker with Liliuokalani Children's Center. And you know, just kind of an offshoot to that 2 day Ho'oponopono. One of the questions I asked in my group was, and I know that eventually I'd like to discuss it more with Auntie Lynette and of course Manu, was when did we stop believing we were gods? You know, that was one question. The second was had to do with um, oh God, what was it? I can't remember now. But anyway, there was a second question I asked, and I just oh yes, it had to do with um, Ho'oponopono. This is just my perspective, but Ho'oponopono is more spiritual and less religious. Because if we bring religion, this is just once again my
No,
perspective,
thank
but
you.
if we bring religion into that concept, which really frankly, I don't remember that part, okay? But if we do bring religion in, we really prevent a lot of people stepping forward. You know, most people are comfortable in a spiritual realm, not necessarily, sometimes not at all, but then they are, you know, the religious part kind of like, well, you know. pushes back. So, yeah, that was another question I brought up too. Because I think if we can keep it, it doesn't have to be even spiritual, but we know that we've got to bring that in. We know that. That's the only way we can feel sometimes. For some people, they can only feel if it's spiritual. But I think we would bring in more people, families, you know, um, because we got to remember Ho'oponopono. And I don't, you probably have heard, but there are people that have forgiven murderers in their family, from their family. There's the one gentleman in New Zealand, his father was murdered. And it takes a lot, you know. Those are the kind of people I like to get conversations with because
Powerful.
what did you do? You
Yeah.
know, to go in and visit. In fact, there's a movie out on that spiritual channel. I forget what it's called, but there's a movie out that is similar, very similar, where and I think based on a true story, where the young man was drunk and killed the wife, and she was up high, she was pregnant. So the husband goes in to forgive because he's a pastor, you know? And he said, you're supposed to forgive. But anyway, that's a whole Pono right there. I mean, that's a lesson. That's a valuable lesson, you know. Um, but anyway, but I do enjoy it. But I mean, I did enjoy it. But those were the two, burning questions though, that I had. No one's answered them yet. I'm sure eventually I'll get into conversation about that. But that's, when did we believe that we were not Akua? Because Akua is everything. In the Hawaiian culture, we've had over, I don't know, 400,000, gods. Why? Because everything was a god. Everything. But that's not uncommon for indigenous cultures.
Yeah.
Everything had spirit. Everything
And
had
I think part of it's um acknowledging the respect and honor that goes along with that title, as opposed to, and also acknowledging that everything is just as powerful, whether we talk about the land, we talk about the water, you know, and not just focusing on one entity.
correct.
We should be most cautious and just focus on that respect and honor toward that. And so, how do we go about through our lives, our everyday lives, just honoring the privilege and the honor of being on this planet together? And that's partly why everything is a god.
I honestly believe that.
Yeah.
That's the thing about children is, not necessarily, you know, uh, in a preachy way, but in an honoring way. I want them to know that they are so great, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
they
no,
possess
exactly.
so much, and I'm honored to be here with you. I'm
I
honored. I want them to know that, to believe that and feel that. And that's very, very important. I have some fifth grade boys that not only are they awesome fishermen, they can name all the fish they get, and
Wow.
they can tell you a recipe
Oh
for
my
each one of those
goodness.
fish. And that blew my mind. I was telling the counseling team, and part of the counseling team is admin, administration. So usually it's VP. But anyway, I'm like, do you know that these two boys, they're avid fishermen? They go, oh yeah, 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 they love to fish. I go, no, but take it a little further. They're avid fishermen that know their fish. They know the names, they can describe it. It's amazing. I said, and then they couldn't get over this third part too. They have recipes. I'm taking down recipes. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing again? Let me put that down. Because, yeah, they got recipes. Oh, yeah, Kupuna, you do this and you cook it this way. And it's like,
Oh my
that's,
God. It sounds
that's
like they have
amazing.
actually done the cooking themselves. It's not
Yeah,
just
that's what I mean.
read.
They've got the
I
recipes.
feel like they should
Um,
be like running a restaurant and
oh,
be a chef or
wow.
something.
Blew
Like,
my mind. Blew my mind. Like we,
yeah,
but I would never have known it, right? If we didn't engage
yeah,
in conversation, right?
wonderful.
And I'm like, I told the counselors, and then when I came into the program, one of the things that I love to do, and I learned this from a mentor of mine, you come in learning their names. You come in, um, if possible, translating their name into the Hawaiian language, or if they have a Hawaiian name. And then you ask, this is kind of a couple weeks process, but you ask, maybe the second session, I will ask, I'll come back with the meaning of their names and blah, blah, blah. And then I'll ask who gave them their name, because usually the person who gave you the name is the person you're close to. Usually, not always. But yeah. And, I was mind blown by how many of them had biblical names, strong biblical names, you know? Just powerful stuff. But so the counseling team had mentioned to me in the beginning, they said, wow, that's really good that you enter with that. I said, well, it's just such a good way to get to know them, in that way. Um, and that's really important. A name is usually a good clincher. But yeah, and some of them don't know the meaning of their name. So the assignment is, go ask the person who has, gave it to you or find out, and stuff like that. But yeah, some of them had really powerful names. And then when you share that with them, it's a little mind opening, yeah, for them. Yeah, because a lot of them, they don't think of the meaning. Well, most of us don't, but there's such a connection, the Pico connection, to that name. So yeah, it's a good program. It's a really good program. We talk about the birth, Pomahina, when they were born. What was the moon like? What was the moon phase when you were born? And how that, does this sound like you? When you read the significance of that moon. Anything to get to know them really, really well in the beginning, especially. Yeah. So I can roll after that a little bit easier with them. And then you reach a point where they're very comfortable. So they come and self engage, and then they can also talk story. And then sometimes the dynamics, like sometimes it doesn't, well, it doesn't really work sometimes because you have the ones that are overwhelming. They try to have the other kids follow them, and then you have the ones that are resistant. So sometimes I'd have to like mention to the counseling team, perhaps this one should come alone.
Mm,
Perhaps. But then, that person has to want to. You cannot just, I can say that, but I'm not going to
yeah,
force them to come along.
yeah.
Because then it's hell. You don't want it to be that way. You want them to be comfortable and happy. And then finding other things for them to do, for example, like bringing, I had Makale Golf Course bring, their tee-offs, their mats, the mats with the plastic tees, so that they can, let loose, get that golf club and hit. No ball, just hit. And then I had suggested, apparently I missed a teacher that did this too, but he's gone. He's moved on. But I said they should have a workout room for them, not overly excessive workout room, not a bunch of whole equipment like a gym, but something where, they gotta release, some boys, well, some kids in general, but some boys, they just gotta go move, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, so then I made these suggestions so that, and even the one that does the baseball, just wonderful form. And then below me is the basketball court, so then that's another way, but you got to have them. Some of them, they're very high energy, you know, and you're going to get that. And so you have to, how do you? get to know them, right? You're trying to get to know what works, what doesn't work. This pairing is okay, that pairing is not. You know what I mean? That kind of. But you don't want to discourage, because see, I'm not. My role there isn't disciplinarian. I refuse to be disciplinarian. Um, I do not make demands on the kids. Kupuna is someone that they should feel always comfortable with, no matter what, no judgment. And so I don't, I tell the counseling team, please don't look at me as another disciplinarian, and, I've had situations where or not volunteers, but what do you call like aides, they'll come up and they'll question, what the kids are doing. And I usually don't say a word. I just look at them like, um, but I don't, and the kids will tell me later, that person does not like me,
Mm.
does not like me. And and I always tell them, well, don't worry because I'm here. I'm here. And I get it, but you can tell when the vibe is wrong because the kids will just be like, they don't even want to look at the person. You know what I mean? And that's a good indicator too. But so I will tell the counseling team, just I'm not here to discipline them. That's
I
maybe your role.
I love that you're nurturing a space for our youth basically to not only be heard, be validated, and realize that very ripe young age, they're just as important as someone who, I don't know, got a doctorate, went to the moon. Um, Having instilling in them that courage that their voice is valuable is essential, and to never lose that. So thank you. Thank you for
Oh,
doing.
you're welcome. You got to open that pathway.
Yes.
Otherwise they can't find it. You got to open that pathway. And a lot of times, they don't believe that they have possess this power or this energy,
Yeah.
so to speak, to be whatever it is they need to be. So, and that's really all the program is about. It's adding that kupuna component where for most of these kids, like I said, they do not have a tutu. They do not have an elder in their life. Um, and to feel not judged.
Yeah.
I could care less what your grade point average is. I want to know what you're thinking
Yeah.
and how you feel. That's important to me. And once they realize that, they're free. They're free because childhood. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of discipline as well, but or I don't want to just say discipline, but of course, they had to have to adhere to rules, but for the most part, they should be allowed to be free. Otherwise, we're not going to hear from them. We're not going to see them, you know, because they're because there's nothing worse than, and I'm sure you know this, there's nothing worse than a child saying, "Oh, no, never mind," because they don't care. You know what I mean? They don't care. They don't want to hear what I have to say. Never mind. Because some of them do that. They will because they don't know that. And I'm like, well, I can't speak for that person, but as long as you're in front of me, you are the most important person in the world, as long as you're in front of me. So it's all good. And they need that, right? Because they're not getting it from anywhere else. And teachers try, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of loving teachers, but you just don't have enough time.
I think one of the things you're also doing, which is so instrumental, is taking culture into it, where we tend to, whenever Kapuna are speaking or the elders are speaking, everyone must listen. But now you're shifting that, turning it upside down, and even though at this young age they've been taught that's been instilled in them in some capacity, and so being able to know that their voice is just as important
Exactly.
is so instrumental and so powerful. for them.
Right.
So
Well, you know, the counseling team sometimes what they say to, well, not all of them, but there's one in particular. Usually it's the admin, because they're admin, right? The kids see them as admin, administrator, vice principal, right? A little bit different with the counseling staff, but um, they'll say things like, "Don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, stay there, do this." Excuse me, what do you say? Excuse me, don't you say thank you? Or you know what I mean? They constant, constant, like, or what else did they say? Oh yeah, um, you know, uh, go help Kupuna or whatever like that. I'm not too much that way because one of the things my grandson knows about me is this: if you want to help me, then help me. I shouldn't have to ask you if you want to. And that's how I feel about these students because it's got to be natural. It's got to be, yeah, I want to help Kupuna. Yeah, I'm going to help Kupuna take that to the car or whatever. Oh, yeah, I'm going to help Kupuna do this. Not because, so and so told me to. It's not about that, right? So I kind of get a little uncomfortable with that, but I don't say anything because it's important. I mean, unless it's violent or, demeaning, I don't say much because you got to let it play out. You got to see where that goes, where the dynamics is going to happen. So I kind of let it go, but I always tell the students, I'm so grateful that you helped me, but I want you to know that it has to come from your desire to help or you're wanting to help. Otherwise, what is it? You know? And that's important. So yeah, there's things like that. So but meanwhile though, Jose, there are some counselors that are just so super. They're just so super respectful of the kids. Um, the way they talk to them, they've got such tenderness, in the way they talk to them. They're very respectful, and they get a lot of love back. Believe me, these keiki, they give you the love. If they know it's genuine, they just, and yeah, it amazes me sometimes how, and it's hard because, you know, people can be so mean to their own kids, and and you listen to them, you hear the horror stories. And I have had one fifth grade boy tell me, Kupuna, I told you this, but you're not going to say anything, are you? And I go, of course not. You know, I mean, if it happened right then and there, yeah, but I mean, I would because that's what we're supposed to do. But when somebody confides in you, you got to honor that, you know. And they always say, so Kupuna, what are you going to do? I go, oh, you folks give me so much reason to pray. Thank you. I always tell them, you give me so much reason to pray. I'm going to go home and pray about that. But, I used to, when I was young, I used to always hear that, in movies and in plays, always hear the Jewish mom, I'm going to pray. I'm going to church. I'm going back to church. And now I'm like, it's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I'm saying. They knew something, because sometimes, what else do you have to do? What else can you do? But and then you bring that power with you, when you show up, they can feel that. Yeah, they feel that good energy. Yeah, kids are good. I mean, you've got two kids. They read you like a book. You know.
yeah, it's definitely been a beautiful journey to into parenthood and just learning from them every day from the moment they were born to yeah, it's I also remind myself like, okay, we're just all doing the best we can as parents or as gar
And that's all you can do, right?
yeah.
Because we didn't come with any kind of manual, and even if we did,
I mean, there's all these books
it's
out
not
there and
planned.
that kind of stuff, but every child is different and needs that personal touch. And like you said, just listen. And
Yeah.
sometimes listening doesn't necessarily mean words. Listen to
Hmm.
the sound they're making, before they figure out their words. Listen to observe the nonverbal communication.
Right.
Um,
The
there,
body language.
oh
Sometimes it's
yeah,
body language, you know.
yeah, it's fascinating. But yeah, it's been a beautiful journey, I have to say, and I thank you for,
Oh,
sharing
thank you.
your beautiful journey as well. I know you mentioned, finding solitude and advancing your dreams, and uh so it
Oh, that's what I forgot to tell you. One
I
of my greatest wishes is to eventually, I hope, especially the way the country is going, um, I'm thinking of moving to Rapa Nui eventually. My
oh, how
my
exciting.
nephew just became well, he's lives there. His father lives there. His mom lives in Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo. Anyway, and then he became their archaeologist. Is it marine biologist or archaeologist? Archaeologist, maybe. But so I was thinking, yeah, of moving there for the last season of my life, for the last, um, part of my life, to live there. Um, so that's a thought. I don't know. My grandson said, "Oh, Tutu, that's really far," and I'm like, "Well, it's one more place for you to visit." I mean, if I go, but that's the thought.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. I've gotten to read up and study a little bit about them over the past few years. There's an artist, musician, Mahani Avi, I think that's her name.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
she
The Toki Music
Yeah,
School,
well,
man. Oh,
she moved down there, built a school out of basically the way, unfortunately, trash in the oceans tend to be. A lot of it ends up uh, there, and so they
right.
took all those tires and bottles and cans
Exactly.
and
The Hokulea, when they went down there, they went home. The Hokulea crew.
oh yeah,
And then, from what I understand from my nephew, now their donorship is phenomenal. I mean, for a while they were
amazing.
struggling. Now hard to get
Yeah,
donors, but and consistently.
yes,
But from what he told me, they're phenomenal donorship. So that would be well worth helping. She came worldwide. She just last year, actually, she came here to Kahilu, and she went throughout the world to raise money. Yeah,
yes,
to raise money for that.
yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to be able to go there and help.
Hey, Kupuna in the garden,
Yeah, I know, really. But
or
I'd love to. I'd love to. I mean, Rapa Nui just really you me, you
yeah.
know. And there is a family from Hilo. I don't know if you know Cape Malley and his wife Onauna, but anyway, there's a family from Hilo who is also an archaeologist there.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So anyway, so that because I forgot that you asked about
Yeah,
dreams,
yeah, no, no, that's
but
I
that's what
love
I would like to.
your spirit of adventure and the evolution of change and
And
just
that would be my last adventure, in my opinion. To go there and just be, for the rest
okay,
of my life. I'd love that.
amazing. Well, I definitely look forward to staying in touch and seeing where your
Oh,
journey
yeah,
goes. It's so
definitely.
exciting. I just want to thank you today for sharing
Oh,
your beautiful
thank you.
story, Tutupo. And your journey is definitely just a testament to the power of aloha, the
Oh,
wisdom of
thank you.
yourself as a kapuna. And I can only think about like the mentors you must have had and the lessons they instilled in you to that you're now, passing it forward. And so
Right.
such a healing potential. We didn't do a deep dive into the whole Pono Pono 2-day gathering. Maybe that's for another day. But one thing that I still rings in my mind was that sentence or quote about as healers, we need to take time to spend time with other healers,
Oh, yes.
nurturing that is. And that's exactly what I feel like our time today has been. So
Oh, thank you. Same
thank you.
here.
such an honor, and I look forward to continuing our journey together to build
Oh,
community.
yes, I'm sure. And I'm sure our paths will cross again.
Yes,
So,
and
and I'm always here, for you in whatever
thank
capacity I
you. Thank
can
you.
do.
And yes, next time I'm on Hawaii Island, I will let you know because I would
Oh,
actually
yes,
like to meet you in
yes,
person finally
yes.
after all these
That'd be
years. So
great.
thank you.
Yeah,
Well, thank
exactly.
you again. And yeah, so
Thank you.
such a pleasure.
Yeah, same here. You take care.
You too. Take care.
Aloha.